How you do that, there? How you do that, there? And I ain't mad about it. I am your man's Nic Rattlehead. And behind this camera somewhere out in California, watching over your boy, probably burning the heck up. Please stay hydrated, dude. It's my buddy, my pal, my compadre, my amigo. My man's with the master plan, 100 grand, only you, me, and God knows how much I love this guy. Tom, what's your name? Matt the Graff. Matt the Graff. And we are Aftershock Reviews, here to give you the best extreme music reviews, man. And today I give to you...
Oh, I can't wait.
It's a gory, death-doomy slice of just nastiness. This is Not Dark Yet by Phoenix, Arizona's Fluids, or Fluids of Death, whichever one you want to call it, right? This album is great, but it is it's disrespectful. This album cares nothing about your feelings, and it's just the freaking way. I love my death metal, my death doom, my gore grind, whatever this is, right? Because it's a hodgepodge of all those different ideas, right? And I absolutely adore it. Their album last year that we also reviewed, Ignorance Exalted, was also one of my favorite albums from that year. Why? Because it keeps the ideology of which I kind of know metal to be, right? It's offensive on all senses, right? It's gnarly and nasty to the ear, right? You hear a lot of excerpts from like late 80s and maybe like late 70s gore films, right? It's really crazy, but it's also kind of cheesy at the same time too. But like to the uninitiated, they're kind of like, ew, I don't like that, right? And at the same time, because it's offensive here, it also has to match that, right? There has to be a visual representation of what you're hearing, right? So there's a lot of gory images in the album artwork and in the artwork, in the inserts, right? It's really great. But what we do now is they take the whole carcass approach and they rev it up to 1,000 because it's great. Because what they do is now they're using a lot of imagery of real life gore, right? But instead of sometimes making them like collages like the Ignorance Exalted cover, right? Sometimes they just say, here's a freaking photo, stamp Fluids on the top of it, there's your cover. And it's kind of like, that's absolutely, because you can see people being mauled or chopped to death or like bodily secretions like sprawled out across the floor with somebody's teeth in there. Like it's that, right? But it's still an accurate visual representation of what you're hearing. So it's offensive to your eyes, right? But not only is it offensive to your eyes, I don't know how you guys are, but to me, sometimes if I see something, right, I could be like, that's kind of gross, and it makes you kind of want to gag a little bit. It makes, like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what my brain is doing. But because I see filth, right, I then I get this weird taste in my mouth, and it makes me want to gag, right? So not only is it offensive here, it's offensive here, and it's offensive here. I absolutely adore that about this, right? I absolutely do. And it probably makes me a little bit insane. It probably means I need to go see a therapist. But I kid you not, I don't care. I absolutely don't care. It's disrespectful, right? On so many fronts. But let's actually talk about them for a split second as well, because there's also a lineup change right now. The past two LPs from Fluids actually have Cole Jacobson on the vocals, and I loved him. Anybody who knows me knows he's one of the big highlights of this band for me, right? Because he has those deep, guttural, Mortician-like vocals, right? So, quick, another time out, these guys love Mortician. From the buzzsaw grinding bass, right, to the programmed drums, right, to the weird but also somewhat funny sometimes when it comes to Mortician, because we're going to talk about them. Mortician usually use like a lot of like 80s pulp horror movies excerpts when they have it in their albums, right? Like a track will start, but like if it's a 4-minute track, maybe 2 minutes of that is an excerpt from a horror movie, and then the track actually starts, right? They take it to a whole nother level, but they get the inspiration from Mortician, and it's great. It's absolutely great, right? But going back to Cole Jacobson, right? Cole Jacobson was their vocalist, and he was, to me, one of the big highlights because I love it when metal bands do something a little bit different in a landscape that can somewhat feel a little bit samey. They're a breath of fresh air, and Cole Jacobson was a big part of that. But what ended up happening was he's not here with us anymore, and we have Brennan Paul. Now, Brennan Paul comes from Thorns, right? I think they released something last year, and they actually released an album. Let me make sure I'm saying the album's name correctly. Crawling Worship from this year. Both projects are really great. It has a lot of reverb, feels really cavernous, drenched in death doom. It's really good, and it almost feels a little bit epic at the same time. So when I heard Cole Jacobson was gone, that was a big red flag just flailing in the air, right? I'm like, what are you guys doing? What's the problem, right? And then I see Brennan Paul come in, and I'm like, okay. So I go back and listen to Thorns because at some point, like, I don't know every single band. I don't claim to. So I have to go out and like try and find out who some of these people are. And I go and listen to Thorn, right? And I was like, this guy is really good, but he seems really epic, right? How does this work in the landscape that is Fluids? Very freaking well is the answer to that question. Why? Because yes, there are times where I do miss the more deeper side of Cole Jacobson. What Brennan Paul brings, though, is a maniacal sense of dread, and it's great. And his voice reverberates off of the walls, caked in your blood, caked in your secretions, caked in your spit, caked in your entrails. It's reverberating everywhere, right? And I absolutely love it because it makes it feel encompassing, and it builds the world, and it's fantastic, right? So let's actually get into the track listing. Let's talk about Genesis Spoiled. And just from the track listing, just from the name of the track, tells us something that something's different, right? Because not only do we have a different vocalist, but the tracks themselves are not just one word anymore. It's not like hammered, caked, chunked, things of that nature, right? It's Genesis Spoiled, right? And the way that they actually even arrange the track name is really cool. Why? Because every track off this LP has a word that has some type of positive connotation to it that is somehow polluted with a word that almost either A, destroys that positivity, B, humiliates it, or C, corrupts it. It's really great. So it's like this light and dark thing, but like at the end of the day, though, instead of like some type of Disney fairy tale where the good guys always win, it pulls an Avengers Endgame on us. It pulls a Justice League Snyder Cut on us where the good guys lose. They lose. And in this one, good has been completely overwhelmed by darkness and filth, right? And Genesis Spoiled is like the perfect intro into that, because for 2 minutes and 4 seconds, we have this audio insert of this young man who is self-deleting. That's exactly what he is. He's deleting himself. And you get a chance to hear him in those final moments, right? As he's talking about like he's disappointing his parents and he's not a good person. And you start to hear him as he closes his fist, like blood kind of splurts everywhere, right? It's very unsettling and it's very unnerving. And it can almost feel like they're kind of like getting off on that a little bit, right? And this also kind of plays into a little bit of the controversy surrounding Fluids. And the thing about it is, to me, at least, it kind of still falls into the death metal aesthetic, right? It's not supposed to be something that you're kind of like, oh, okay, this is nice. No, it's supposed to be offensive. It's supposed to make you think. It's supposed to kind of put you in a world where you're really uncomfortable. And that's exactly what it is. And it does so. And it does it in the first two. Think about that now. In an album that's not even an album long, the first 2 minutes they dedicate to this, right? And this takes what Mortician did and turns it to 1,000, right? Because gone are the 80s pulp stuff. And here now is a snuff film. That's exactly what it is. It's an auditory snuff film. That's exactly what it is. And that's what we're witnessing, right? But on the 2 minute and 5 second mark, a second later after that, it just drops. Lord have mercy, the roof caves in. And what we get after that is this mid-tempo stomping groove. And it just waves from side to freaking side. And it is fantastic. We get everything. The buzzing bass, oh my gosh, Brennan Paul's vocals is front and center in this album. Yes, everything is still kind of present in the mix, right? But what they do is, instead of kind of like having Caleb Jacobson, here it is, getting a little excited, as a part of the scenery, they kind of put Brennan in the front a little bit, right? And he's screaming in your face. Yo! It's like Cole came from his nuts, right? Brennan is coming from his diaphragm and screaming in your face as he's ripping out your large intestine. It's yowie. It is, dang, it's great. It's absolutely fantastic. And I like this new fresh element to Fluids, right? I love Cole Jacobson, but Brennan Paul's vocals work well here, surprisingly well. And I'm very happy with the choice that Fluids made in order to hire him and bring him into their fold, right? Because this thing smokes like a son of a gun. Because yeah, still, we have that big, huge, hulking groove, but it caves in around itself and it starts going into this wailing blast beat. It's great. And the bass and the guitar and the blast beat and the vocals merge together to make some type of indistinguishable soup, right? So it's just a whole bunch of noise just bombarding the listener, and you can't tell what the guitar is doing. You can't tell what the bass is doing. And then you just hear Brennan, you just hear him in the midst of this maelstrom. And it's absolutely fantastic. And now it starts to do this weird hopscotch type of thing where it goes from this frantic melee to this wonderful groove until it fades out, right? And we get Hope Forgotten. Now, here's the thing I really do like about this album as well. When we go back to Ignorance Exalted, tracks like Redacted and Smothered really drive home the death doom aspect of these albums, right? It really does drive those home. But at the same time, though, it's only 2 tracks off of the whole project. Here, they do a really good job of spreading the more slower moments, not even more slower, the painfully slower moments throughout the track list. And so we have one when it comes to Hope Forgotten. Mercy Gelded is midway through the album. And then the closer, Humanity Reviled. We'll get there. But let's talk about Hope Forgotten real quick, because it is slow, man. And it just, that high that you get from Genesis Spoiled, it brings it crashing down for 2 minutes and 38 seconds on Hope Forgotten. And it is wonderful. It's jarring, right? And it's so jarring it can almost give you heart palpitations, right? It's kind of like when you drink sweet tea and you're really excited. You're getting that rush from the sweet tea, right? And all the sugar and all the leaves and whatever else like that. But as you're sitting down and you're kind of coming off of that, your heart starts kind of doing this a little bit because it's kind of having to adjust from that huge bit of stimulation as you're now kind of sitting stagnant, right? It's the same freaking thing. And I absolutely adore it for it. It's different shades of Fluids back in this one album, and like in the first 2 tracks, and it's absolutely fantastic. I love this band. I absolutely love this band, right? And after that, we get Empathy Shed. Now, this is one of these singles prior to this album, right? And Empathy Shed starts out with this triplet thing and into a blast beat. So it goes like, and you hear the electronic percussion just going off in the background in a frenzy. And like Brennan is just growling and snarling across the entire album, like the froth from his mouth is dripping across the entire track, or dripping across the drums, dripping across the bass, dripping across the guitars. And it goes into this really great groove. And that's the thing about it yet again. Like, the slams are there. The thundering percussion is there, right? Everything that would make a good gore grind and a good death doom album is present here in this track listing, right? But I really want to get to Humanity Reviled, right? I really want to get there. Why? Because Humanity Reviled is the longest, and I mean this, the longest Fluids track I've heard. I think at like 8 minutes and 15 seconds, right? And I think not only is it one of the longest ones, I will venture and say it is my favorite Fluids track I've heard. And it goes Humanity Reviled, and then I'll say Quartered, and then Hammered. It's like that. It's absolutely great because for 8 minutes and 15 seconds, it's Death Doom, son. That's exactly what it is. And it starts out with this slow, hypnotic groove, and it's nasty, and it's gnarly, and it's towering, and I love it. It's great. It's so freaking chunky. It really is. It just goes like boom, 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 boom. It's great, and that's all it does for like 4 minutes and like maybe 30 seconds, right? And you have Brennan just ripping the track a new one, almost in rhythm, in tandem with the percussion, right? But once you get used to that sway, once you get used to that rhythm, it kind of rumbles a little bit and brings in, and I mean this too, I mean this with all my heart and soul, and I thought about this, is not a hot take, the best riff off the entire album, because it is a doomy riff. It is a really wonderfully doomy and melodic riff. It just goes boom, ding, boom, ding, boom, boom, ding, boom, 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 ding, boom, ding. Do it with me, Shadow. We both go headbang together. It goes like boom, ding, 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 bing, boom, boom, boom. He's the only one I know who'll headbang with me. He's the only one. That's my buddy. Best riff from the album, right? And then it starts to fade into the background until we get another excerpt, right? The album is fantastic, and the album is unsung. A lot, to me, I think people get offended by Fluids, and as you should be offended by all of this. But it is the fact that it is so offensive and in your face, right? And unapologetic is what gives it its charm. This thing is absolutely fantastic. This thing makes me so happy. Like, it is such a good mix of things that are new with Mortician, and even stuff like Last Days of Humanity, which is also another good gore grind band, and we will talk about their new album that just came out this year, because it's fun. It's fun. If you think you don't understand the vocals in this album, Last Days of Humanity, listen, it's good stuff, man. It's absolutely good stuff. And so is this. The name of this album, again, is called Not Dark Yet by Phoenix, Arizona's Fluids, or Fluids of Death. Please go out, support them. You can still pick up their CDs. I got my copy right over there. And not only just pick up that CD, pick up a shirt. Pick up their past albums as well. Like, support your bands, man. Like, we really need to do that because they're trying to get back on the road now, but then, of course, due to, this new variant, I don't know if we're going to get shut down again. I hope we don't. But this is still important that we need to support our band. So go out, buy merch, man. We'll leave links for that in the description below. Check them out, man. I am your man's Nic Rattlehead. And behind this camera somewhere out in California is my man's with the master plan 100 grand. Tell him one more time, what's your name, man? Matt Graff. Yeah. Wash your hands. Support your bands. Peace. How you do that, girl?